Hi everyone! Welcome to the October 2023 edition of Archaeology News from the Inside Archaeology YouTube channel. Join me on a journey through time as we explore the latest discoveries from the world of archaeology that are helping us piece together the puzzle of humanity's rich and diverse heritage. What's the significance of finding a Neolithic intact chamber tomb on the main island of Orkney? Stay tuned to find out the answer to this and other questions as I delve into the past, bringing you in-depth analyses and captivating stories from the archaeological world. This month, we also have a very exciting Inside Archaeology First, an exclusive interview with Dr. Anderson Weimark from the National Museum of Scotland, speaking about his discovery on Orkney. Okay, let's dig in. We have 9 stories today in our top discoveries segment, which I will cover in chronological order, starting with those that are the farthest back in time and working my way up. We start today with an update on fossilized human footprints found in the USA. In 2021, a team of scientists published a paper claiming that they had discovered human footprints in New Mexico's White Sands National Park, which were between 23,000 and 21,000 years old. This announcement and the radiocarbon dating method used was met with much skepticism, as this discovery made the footprints at least 5,000 years older than the accepted date for human arrival to the American continents. Now, in October 2023, the team has published a second paper with additional data from another round of dating. For this new set of dates, the team extracted pollen from the same layers of sediment targeted in the first paper, which lie underneath, between, and on top of various sets of footprints. They also collected quartz grains from a layer of clay just above the oldest tracks. In different labs than those used in the first paper, the pollen from pine trees was isolated and radiocarbon dated. They also performed optically stimulated luminescence dating on the quartz grains, a method that measures when the grain was last exposed to sunlight. The pollen return dates between 23,000 and 21,000 years old, and the OSL dates showed the quartz grains were buried between 21,400 and 18,000 years ago, results that correlate with the original dating. Some skepticism remains, and some people are asking for even more dating to be done, but researchers on both sides of the debate agree that archaeologists should now start looking for other sites from this time period. Sediments formed during the last ice age have been largely ignored by archaeologists in North America, as they were thought to predate people's arrival. Finding more sites like this would push the debate forward and could end up actually rewriting history. Our next discovery comes from Israel, where archaeologists have found evidence of the first instance of red paint made from plants on an array of 15,000-year-old shell beads and other artifacts originally found during excavations in the 1930s as a part of a cache of adornments near human burials inside Kabara Cave on Mount Carmel. The distinct bright red hue of the artifacts caught archaeologist Laurent Davin's eye in a display case at Jerusalem's Rockefeller Archaeological Museum, and he then set out to discover its origin. While the use of red mineral pigments, such as ochre, started in Africa around 140,000 years ago, the earliest documentation of organic plant or animal-based red pigments is known from only 6,000 years ago. The beads in their burial deposit had already been stratigraphically and radiocarbon dated to the early Natufian culture, a people who were the first hunter-gatherers to start settling down to a more sedentary lifestyle across the Levant. The origin of the pigment was determined using 2 spectroscopy techniques to analyze 10 red-stained shell beads. The first technique showed that there was no iron in the pigment, ruling out an ochre source. But it also showed a high carbon content that pointed to an organic origin. The second technique characterized the molecular composition of the pigment and revealed that the patterns produced by the dye were the same across all 10 beads and most closely matched signatures from the roots of plants belonging to the madder family. It was already known from prehistoric pollen analysis that these plants had grown at Mount Carmel during the end of the Pleistocene period, when the Natufians would have been around. This means that these beads are now the oldest known example of humans using plants to manufacture red pigment. This adds a previously unknown behavioral aspect of Natufian societies and broadens our knowledge of early ornamental practices and the operational sequence of pigmenting materials during a crucial period in human history. We now go to the Orkney Islands in Scotland, where the ruins of a 5,000-year-old tomb have been found, containing 14 articulated skeletons of men, women, and children, two positioned as if they were embracing. I am very pleased to say that instead of hearing me talk about this exciting discovery, I can present to you my interview with Dr. Hugo Anderson Weimark from the National Museum of Scotland, who instigated and co-directed the excavation. Let's dig in. Why did you excavate in this area?
We were led to this particular site by digging in the museum archives. So this project came about from a chance find relating to paperwork of a treasure trove case in the 19th century. And these documents are held in National Museum Scotland. I was working on treasure trove cases at that time. And I just spotted reference to a tomb in Orkney and a mace head and a stone ball that were found there. There was a little newspaper clipping attached to the correspondence. And just reading it, I thought, I've never heard of a tomb in Ham. So I went back to the newspaper article and went through it. And basically from that, a project developed to try and find this site because it sounded very convincingly like a Neolithic tomb. And the antiquarian or antiquary who had flagged the site, James Walls-Kirster, was very well known in Orkney as the local go-to archaeologist when finds were made. And he had just 8 years previously excavated at Kofun. So he knew what these tombs looked like. So although he described it as being very badly destroyed, it seemed quite possible that there was a good chance that this was another Neolithic tomb. So from there, it spiraled in the usual way of digging around. We found a private archive of paperwork relating to Kirster, a little sketch, which again showed some masonry which looked like a cell of a Neolithic tomb. And usefully, this note contained a reference to it's 150 yards east of the farmhouse. So we had a dot on the map then to search. Geophysics followed. Precisely 150 meters from that house was this massive anomaly, 8 meters in diameter. It appeared very significant. That was where we got to. And then we just this summer opened up a very small excavation trench to see if that was the site, was the archaeology Kirster has seen. So we were really excited because within a matter of a day or two, we had identified that this was the place that Kirster was looking. And we revealed, you could see in outline, the remains of some of the stonework and essentially a big hole in the ground where the stonework had once been because it had been robbed out. You could see it was a very big and impressive monument.
I talk a lot sometimes about how, X never marks the spot in archaeology, but effectively this time, that is kind of what you came across.
Yeah.
What makes this tomb or this find unique or special?
Neolithic tombs in Orkney are not uncommon, but there aren't any in East Mainland. So this is the first Neolithic tomb found in East Mainland. It plugs a hole in the distribution of tombs in Orkney. What makes this significant is that actually in Orkney, most of the monuments are upstanding. This would have once been a very impressive site, probably, a mound 15 meters in diameter, probably at least 4 or 5 meters tall with this big stone structure in the middle. But it has been entirely erased from that landscape. So it not only shows that there is still a lot more archaeology to be found in Orkney. It's often said, that you scratch the ground in Orkney and you find archaeology, but it shows the site was nearly removed in the 19th century. So it went from probably in the early 19th century being a large upstanding mound, but all of the stone from that structure was stripped away and used for building, and the site forgotten until 1896. The son of the farmer who was living in that house, who was no more than 13 years old, set about digging around in that quarry and found these archaeological artifacts, which were reported in the paper. It shows the richness of Orcadian archaeology and how much there is still to be found. And even when a site is flagged as being destroyed, there can still be incredibly exciting discoveries there. The skeletal remains we found were centimeters away. Effectively, the Victorian truncation ran straight up to them, and they had just escaped being destroyed.
How will discovery of this tomb and perhaps study of the skeletons as well from the site, how will they contribute to our knowledge of Neolithic Orkney?
The skeletal remains are they're probably the most exciting thing about this site. It's lovely to have a new tomb. It's lovely to have a plan of the monument, but to have in situ burial deposits is so rare. So many tombs were excavated in the 19th century. Obviously, the standards used were generally low. The material that we have from the older excavations is limited in what we can do with it. Obviously, a lot of it has been subject to ancient DNA, isotope analysis, and the like. But a complete new assemblage is incredibly valuable. We know exactly where all these bones were positioned in that tomb. And what's more importantly here, we have articulated skeletons. So we can see how the bodies were buried, how they were buried in relation to each other. We can build a very tight chronological sequence of how people went into that tomb. And then with all those new techniques, understand their actual relationships in their genetics. It's an incredibly good sized group of people, and this will feed into this bigger picture of Neolithic people. In all, their skeletal remains will tell us so much about those people and how they lived and how they moved around, how they connected with other communities.
On that note, what are the next plans for the site? Are you going to go back and excavate again?
We're not long out the field. We're writing up our data structure report, our assessment of the archaeological deposits. We do plan further excavations at the site to see what else survives. And certainly it seems that the burial context of the environments have been changed significantly, and there is evidence of deterioration of some of those human remains since they were disturbed in the Victorian period. So we're looking to excavate more of those, but this is all dependent on funding as to what scale of excavation when we do it. So a lot of that's still open at the moment, but yes, we do hope to go back and see more of this site.
What will happen to this site and the remains that you found on it once your entire project on it is finished?
Well, we've obviously got a lot of work to do on analysing, reporting, recording this material. But in the long run, this archive will be deposited in a museum through treasure trove. So in Scotland, obviously, all archaeological assemblages and finds have to go through treasure trove for allocation to a museum. Depending on which museum bids, this is likely to end up in Orkney Museum.
How can people keep up to date with your project and what happens to it in the future?
We don't have a website up about it, but we'll be developing that over the next year, and there'll be more information coming out. And we're certainly, this year we didn't do a lot of promotion of it in advance because it was a very speculative dig. We might not have found the tomb at all. So we decided to keep it low key while we were actually excavating in the field. Next year, we will certainly be highlighting more of our discoveries as we go. So it will be out through the usual social media channels and the like.
That's it for this discovery. Thanks again to Dr. Anderson Weimark and the NMS for agreeing to come on to Archaeology News and for providing the images you've seen alongside this story from the site. Now we head to the Royal Cemetery of Abydos in Egypt, where new excavations at the tomb of a First Dynasty queen have resulted in the suggestion that she may have been Egypt's first female ruler. Queen Meret-Neith, whose name means beloved of the goddess Neith, lived around 5,000 years ago and was the wife of King Jet and the mother of his heir, King Den. Although her tomb was discovered in 1900, the recent excavations have revealed that her monumental grave was piled with hundreds of jars of grape seeds, the remnants of wine, and other royal grave goods. Tomb inscriptions indicate Meret-Neith held an important role in the treasury and other governmental positions. An earlier finding showed that the queen's name features after her sons on an inscribed list of rulers discovered in his tomb at Saqqara, followed by the title King's Mother. This might mean that she ruled as regent during Den's youth. Her tomb complex includes the graves of 41 courtiers and servants and was made with mud bricks, clay, and wood. The excavators also found that it was built in several construction phases over a relatively long period of time. This discovery has caused widespread debate among Egyptologists as to the extent of Meret-Neith's status and influence. Some think a regency could explain why she was buried with such pomp and ceremony at the royal cemetery. Others think that these results demonstrate that she ruled over the kingdom, predating the more famous Hatshepsut by 1400 years. The excavation is still ongoing and will doubtless yield more exciting insights into the early dynastic period of Egypt. Next up, in a suburb of Naples in Italy, an archaeological survey in advance of updates to the city water supply system has led to the discovery of a 2,000-year-old untouched Roman chamber tomb full of pristine frescoes on its ceilings and walls. The discovery comes as a part of a test excavation that uncovered a necropolis of burials, inhumations, and cremations dating back at least 400 years, from the Republican to the imperial eras of Rome. The tomb was found at the edge of the burial ground when archaeologists found an opus incertum wall. It proved to be the front wall of a chamber tomb, and like the interior, it too was in outstanding condition, still sealed with a heavy tufa slab over the square entrance. The frescoes within are perfectly intact and vividly colorful. They depict numerous mythological figures, such as sea gods known as ichthyocentaurs, and figurative scenes, the highlight of which is a striking painting of the 12th labor of Hercules, when he descended into Hades to capture the three-headed monster dog Cerberus. The mausoleum has now been named the Tomb of Cerberus after this depiction. 3 painted altars with vessels for libations, the inhumed still placed on funeral beds with rich objects, complete the discovery which, in this area, is unprecedented. The excavation of the chamber tomb is still ongoing, and archaeologists intend to look into the larger necropolis as well. Our next discovery for October comes from the same region and time period, as computer science has now allowed us to start deciphering carbonized papyrus scrolls burnt to ash in the library of a luxurious villa belonging to a Roman statesman and located at Herculaneum during the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE. This disaster was thought to have destroyed the scrolls and the knowledge within them for good. But now the first word has been extracted using 3D X-ray images and an artificial intelligence program trained to read letters based on subtle changes that the ancient ink made to the structure of the papyrus. The discovery comes as a result of the Vesuvius Challenge, which was launched in March 2023 and offers cash prizes for extracting legible words from the scrolls. 2 computer science students improved the search process and independently hit on the same ancient Greek word, porphyra, meaning purple. The first student to find the word has won $40,000, and the second has won $10,000. 3 lines of the scroll, containing up to 10 letters, are now readable, with more expected to come. A recent section shows at least 4 columns of text. As the only intact library to survive from antiquity, there is immense interest in these Herculaneum scrolls. Most of the texts analyzed so far are written in ancient Greek, but there are some that might be in Latin as well. The race is now on to read the rest. Now we go to Japan, where a seemingly unremarkable car park in Ikaruga has revealed a hidden treasure beneath its surface, a 1,400-year-old ancient tomb believed to belong to an elite warrior. During routine construction work for a hotel courtyard, the presence of a kofun was detected. This is a distinct type of burial mound reserved for rulers, warriors, and nobility. The tomb itself measured nearly 4 meters in length, 1.6 meters in width, and 1 meter in depth. Surprisingly, it had remained untouched by grave robbers. Among the remarkable artifacts found within were iron swords, arrowheads, horse harnesses, earthenware clay pots, and necklace beads, all dating back to the late 6th century CE. These relics not only attest to the high status of the individual interred in the tomb, but also provide crucial historical context for the era. Although the human remains of the occupants had decomposed, the positioning of the swords suggested that 2 individuals were likely buried there. It probably belonged to a locally influential figure, offering a unique glimpse into Japan's early elite class. The site has been named the Funazuka Kofun Burial Mound, and the tomb will be backfilled and preserved to protect it. The artifacts will be displayed at a local museum. Our penultimate find was sent to me by a follower on Instagram. and takes us to southwest Finland, where an Iron Crusader period sword has led to the discovery of an extensive cemetery. The sword type is typical of the period of 1050 to 1150 CE. It has a bar-like straight crossguard and a three-sided oval pommel. Following the discovery of the sword, an archaeological survey of the area was carried out, which turned up a number of artifacts, including parts of another sword, remains of wooden coffins, and human bones. The most remarkable find, though, was the remains of a leather belt, adorned with 30 square bronze plaques, decorated with rosette patterns, and several cross-shaped pendants, all of which had been attached to the belt. This is the first confirmed discovery of a cemetery dating to the end of the Iron Age in the Salonjoki River Valley. Altogether, 8 graves were discovered, but it is estimated the site may contain dozens more burials, possibly as many as 200. Radiocarbon dating is being carried out on the bone recovered from the site. The belt and a knife sheath are being x-rayed, further studied, and conserved. Research will continue there until at least the beginning of 2024. Now, for our last discovery, we head to China, where archaeologists have found 59 stone grenades in the ruins of a building in the western section of the Badaling Great Wall. The stone bombs were major weapons used to defend against enemies during the Ming Dynasty, which reigned from 1368 to 1644 CE. These seemingly unremarkable stones were inscribed with orders and had a round hole in the center so that they could be filled with gunpowder before being sealed and thrown. It is thought that the building they were found in was a warehouse storing weapons, and it is the first time that such a weapon storehouse has been found along the Beijing sections of the Great Wall. Other buildings, such as a horse face wall that allowed soldiers to climb up and shoot arrows, and a stone fort used to support cannons, were discovered during the same project. These discoveries are a result of continuous research and conservation efforts concerning the Great Wall. That's it for our top discoveries. Which one was your favorite? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this segment, don't forget to like the video. Now we're going to move on to current news and events. Our first story for this segment comes from UNESCO, who have announced plans for a virtual museum of stolen cultural artifacts, aimed at raising public awareness of trafficking and the unique importance of cultural heritage. Costing $2.5 million to make, the project is being developed with the international police organization, Interpol, whose database of cultural objects stolen from museums, collections, and archaeological sites worldwide lists more than 52,000 missing artifacts. Visitors will navigate through a succession of virtual spaces containing detailed 3D images of the artifacts, each accompanied by materials explaining their unique cultural significance, including stories and testimonies from local communities. Designing and building the virtual museum is a complex job. One of the most time-consuming tasks is creating scalable 3D images of the artifacts, especially those where there is no physical record of them beyond a small black and white photo. UNESCO does not expect to be able to name the items that will make up the initial collection until shortly before the museum is expected to open in 2025. Next, Spanish police in Madrid have announced the seizure of 60 million euros worth of ancient gold artifacts that have been stolen from Ukraine. Working with the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, 11 pieces of Scythian gold were recovered that had been stolen and illicitly exported from Ukraine in the first few months of 2016. The Scythians were an ancient nomadic people who lived in what is now southern Ukraine and were highly skilled goldsmiths. These artifacts date from the 8th to the 4th centuries BCE. The discovery is a result of a long-term operation that has uncovered a criminal network dedicated to the illicit trafficking of cultural property from Ukraine. A network of Ukrainian and Spanish citizens were attempting to sell the pieces using forged documents that said they were the property of a Ukrainian Orthodox priest who lives in Madrid. Spanish police have arrested 3 Spaniards and 2 Ukrainians in connection with the case, and experts are currently assessing the pieces. Next, we go to Arequipa in Peru. A new reconstruction model has been unveiled of the famous Inca ice maiden. The girl's preserved remains were first found in 1995 at an altitude of 6,400 meters during an expedition to the Ampato volcano. She is thought to have been sacrificed in a ritual more than 500 years ago at the age of around 14 to 15. She was found wearing a ceremonial tunic and a headpiece, and was surrounded by ceramic objects including bowls and figurines. A CT scan found that the probable cause of death was a severe blow to the back of her head. It is thought that she was drugged and made to kneel before she was hit over the head in a human sacrifice to the gods. Now, these body scans, skull measurements, DNA studies, and ethnological characteristics have allowed a team of Peruvian and Polish scientists working with a specialist in facial reconstruction to build a silicon bust of the teenage girl. It took more than 400 hours of work to create the model, which is now on display alongside the girl's remains at the Andean Sanctuaries Museum of the Catholic University of Santa Maria in Arequipa. Lastly, the Pergamon Museum in Berlin has now completely closed in order to carry out comprehensive renovation work for about 4 years as part of a longer 14-year-long refurbishment project. This work has been a long time coming, as apparently some of the building's priceless artifacts were at risk of damage due to the condition of the facilities. Take this into account when planning a visit to Berlin, as you will not be able to visit the Museum for Islamic Art, the Museum of the Ancient Near East, the Antique Collection, and the popular Pergamon Altar and Ishtar Gate until this first phase is finished in 4 years. That's the end of current news and events. We normally close our program talking about archaeology and entertainment and pop culture, but I've not really found anything to report on for this month, so let me know if there was anything that I missed. That means that that's everything for the October edition of Archaeology News. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. Is there anything important that I missed? Don't forget to comment, like the video, or subscribe to the channel before you leave. If you have any stories you think should be featured on next month's show, feel free to send them to me via DM on Instagram. If you're feeling extra generous, you can give me a super thanks or go to my Ko-fi page and support me with a small donation. Taking a few seconds to support me in any way that's feasible for you really helps the channel grow so that I can continue to provide you with quality heritage content that you can trust is well sourced, researched, and presented by someone who is an expert in this subject. Thank you so much for watching. Stay curious, and I hope to see you on my next adventure into the world of archaeology.